Timmy. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Timmy. Ba-ba-ba-ba.
Ice, ice, baby.
Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Business Plays. This one, Donkey Kong History's greatest copyright disputes. Because when we think of interesting YouTube content and videos that people would like to click on, copyright disputes is exactly what comes to mind. And obviously this is going to be a wildly popular video. Where do I come up with this? My favorite copyright dispute that I've ever had on YouTube. I don't know, like as a casual YouTube viewer, maybe you're not familiar with how copyright disputes on YouTube work, but it's like someone could be like, hey, that's my copyright on one of my videos. And like, often it's just fair use. But the best one I had was like, I used a section, it was like a 5-second section of one of Winston Churchill's speeches like during the war. And it was apparently owned by, was it Sony? It was some Japanese company. And I'm like, wait, this Japanese company owns the copyright to Winston Churchill's speeches? Also, I used 5 seconds, which definitely falls into fair use. And also, more importantly, how the does Sony own the copyright to Winston Churchill making speeches in Parliament? I'm like, who the paying Winston Churchill? That's right, the taxpayer. Why do you get to sell their government? What the
I think you were being a total and utter jerk.
Ooh, okay.
You suck.
What happens here is Danny writes me a script, I will read the script, and Sam will add some memes, maybe edit the video if he feels like it. I can still vividly remember the excitement of dashing into the arcades on Skegness Pier in 1980, shoving 10 pence into the slot of my favourite machine and watching the words, "How high can you get?" flicker up on the screen. I'll tell you that, very high is the answer. Very, very high. Looking back now, it was quite an odd welcome message for an arcade game aimed at impressionable kids. I don't know what you mean, Danny. I don't think that has any other meaning whatsoever. Someone in the comments the other day was like, Simon, are you aware that Blaze has another meaning? And I'm like, oh yes, I am fully aware. I'm pretty sure it was entirely innocent. It was. The game was Nintendo's Donkey Kong, and the idea was to guide an early incarnation of Mario, ever higher, on the platforms to rescue his missus from a giant antisocial gorilla at the very top of the screen. But back when I was a kid, I never really made any sort of mental association between the height-loving arcade gorilla and a certain other skyscraper-climbing gorilla of the silver screen. But that's probably because I was playing Donkey Kong years before I ever got to see a King Kong movie. Although King Kong definitely came out before Donkey Kong, because it was in black and white, right? There's like a big, I was going to say donkey, but it's not a donkey. It's a gorilla, and it climbs up the Empire State Building, and Jack Black's there or something. But you can certainly see a few basic similarities. Well, yeah, they're both gorillas, and they climb but that's what gorillas do. This is really pushing it. And there's also called King Kong and Donkey Kong. Okay, I'm beginning to see the similarities. Okay, fair enough. Judge Simon ruled. This is copyright infringement. It's not. And if Nintendo's original plans for the platform hadn't been scuppered, we would never have seen one of the most intriguing examples of chest-thumping copyright battles in history. At the risk of stating the bleeding obvious to savvy Business Plays viewers, and we all know that every Business Plays viewer is savvy, it's worth pausing to briefly explain the difference between a patent, a trademark, and a copyright protection, as the three different terms are often misused or misunderstood. I'm super familiar with all of this because of the work I do, but let's get into it anyway. Maybe I'll add some comments or just let Danny do his thing. Patents are limited duration rights relating to a pioneering new invention such as a magnificent new flying machine or a gerbil tunnel jumper. OG Business Plays legend. Reference. Trademarks are usually words, phrases, symbols, and designs that clearly distinguish one source of product from another, such as the Microsoft name or the Enron logo. Oh, I'm wearing the appropriate shirt today. You can buy this at purchasethemerch.co. It's a Blaze logo made to look like the Enron logo, allegedly. Copyrights can be more interesting and perhaps a little more cloudy, as they are intended to protect works of literature, music, and arts, which have been tangibly expressed. Yeah, don't you be copying this Business Plays. Like someone re-uploads Business Plays, I'll be like, copyright claim. Although it's really hard because then I have to put my address into the form. And it's like, I don't want to put my address into the form. What So whereas patents generally protect a scientific invention and trademarks generally protect a business brand, copyrights are more about protecting creative works of authorship, such as, say, two slightly different fictional grumpy gorillas. In a recent Business Plays video on video game fails, we covered how Nintendo's Donkey Kong was essentially just a happy accident, which was originally intended to be a hasty bodge job replacement for the failed Radarscope arcade game, but ended up single-handedly transforming hairy-handedly, retransforming the fortunes of Nintendo. However, when the designer Shigeru Miyamoto originally conceived the new platform in 1981, it was supposed to be based on Popeye, with the idea being that the spinach-munching cartoon character was on a mission to rescue Olive Oyl from the evil clutches of Bluto. Fascinating. When the licensing deal fell through, Miyamoto kept the basic principles of the game, but Popeye was replaced with Jumpman, creative, later to become more famous as Mario.
Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario!
Olive Oyl was replaced with Jumpman's girlfriend, Pauline, and Bluto was replaced with a giant gorilla called Donkey Kong. Is licensing better? Like, would this game be so popular if it was a Popeye-themed game? Wouldn't people be like, it's just kind of capitalizing on Popeye, isn't it? It's not really good in and of itself. It's often wrongly claimed that the name Donkey Kong was an unintended result of a bad translation of Monkey Kong. But yeah, it is. I've never thought about that, but it is weird that it's called Donkey Kong. Like, what the f*** had donkey got to do with it? There are no f***ing donkeys. But in fact, Miyamoto had chosen the word donkey to represent a dumb and stubborn character, while he felt that Kong was a generic Japanese term for any kind of scary ape.
If he shoots ya, it's gonna hurt.
The Universal Studios didn't agree that the name and character was quite so generic. King Kong! King Kong had first clambered onto the big screen in 1933 with RKO Pictures, and over 4 decades later, Universal acquired the rights to produce a monster hit remake of the film in 1976. This remake had itself generated multiple rounds of litigation, with several different parties insisting that they owned parts of the name, character, and plot, but Universal had cleverly managed to come out on top. We'll come back to that in a moment. Bet they had good lawyers. During the early 1980s, Universal president Sid Sheinberg was keen to dip a cautious toe into the burgeoning video game industry. The company ended up signing a deal with Tiger Electronics to produce an exclusive King Kong digital handheld game. But during his exploration into this new gaming scene, Sheinberg was quite miffed when he came across a Donkey Kong game, which he felt was shamelessly ripping off the characters and plot from the film, which his company owned the rights to. I can see why. You'd be like, that's a bit similar, isn't it? By this point, Nintendo had entered into licensing agreements with other video game developers such as Coleco and Atari to release home console versions of their arcade game classic. So Universal took it upon themselves to send out a bunch of strongly worded cease and desist letters to Nintendo and all of those licensees who were producing their own versions of the game. I don't know if there's such a thing as a non strongly worded. Oh, there is. Jack Daniels' team of lawyers. I mean, they don't send a cease and desist, they just send a friendly letter asking people to stop plagiarizing their brands or whatever. But I've received one cease and desist letter in my YouTube career, and it was very strongly worded and it was very scary. Basically, take this down or we're gonna sue the absolute shit out of you. We're very rich. And I was like, okay, my bad. And it was my fault, to be fair. And I won't say any more about it because the nature of these things.
If he shoots ya, it's gonna hurt.
The choice was pretty clear-cut. Either shell out loads of money to Universal, destroy all the games, or get sued. Some of the licensees felt that they were very much over a Donkey Kong barrel. For example, Coleco wasn't selling their version of Donkey Kong as an individual title, it was getting packaged with their actual ColecoVision console. This had the potential to cock up their entire operation. Under threat from the mighty Universal, nearly all of the licensees, even Atari, just caved into the demands of the film studio and agreed to pay generous royalties on sales of the massively successful game, sending millions of dollars into Universal's coffers. Universal did well out of this, didn't they? It's like, yeah, that's a bit like ours. We'll take some of that. Thank you very much. I'd be so tempted to be like, burning it down. I'm out. But not Nintendo. Although they initially considered offering a settlement of somewhere between $5 to $7 million to get Universal off their back, the Japanese company eventually decided to fight the film studio in courts. I hope they won. I feel like Universal's overstepping a lot here. It is similar, but it's also different. A brave move considering that Nintendo was still a relatively small company back in those days, certainly in comparison to Universal. Sheinberg reportedly advised Nintendo, "You better start saving money to pay for your attorney's fees." Okay, so do your lawyers. But the thing is, Nintendo had done their homework. Universal was claiming that they owned the rights to the plot and the characters from King Kong, and they argued in a 7-day trial at the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, bloody hell, that's a long name, that Nintendo's Donkey Kong was a blatant infringement of their of this copyright. But Nintendo had discovered that while Universal may have held the rights to produce a remake of the 1933 RKO film, they didn't have any specific ownership of the characters at all. You made an error at Universal. And how did they know this? Because silly old Universal had themselves proven in court a few years earlier that King Kong belonged in the public domain. Why? Oh, you did it so you could... Oh, Universal, I see how you f***ed yourself. They did it when they... I'm gonna bet, I don't know. I'm betting they did it when they wanted the rights. They wanted to get the rights to the movie, but then all of the stuff associated with the movie so they could merchandise and do posters and do all of this stuff, they didn't want to pay for, so they argued and won that it was in the public domain, so they only had to pay for the rights to the movie and nothing else, and they could use all of that and then use the movie to market all of this for free without paying the original copyright holders. And now they're getting fucked by it, which feels so good. Please tell me this is what happened. Back when Universal was fighting litigation over its 1976 remake of King Kong, the studio managed to walk away in triumph by successfully arguing that the copyrights on the characters had long expired without renewal, and therefore anyone was free to use the characters, though not the specific plot of the RKO movie, without fear of legal repercussions. Yes! Love it! The judge in this new case against Nintendo completely agreed with those findings, so helpfully provided years earlier by Universal. Yeah, I mean, it set the precedent. And remarked that even if the studio had owned all of the relevant properties, Nintendo would still have won the Donkey Kong case, as it could be considered a very loose parody of King Kong at best. Mwah, I like you, Judge. It's good. I like it when it works out right, how I want it to work out, because allegedly Universal. Universal was given a stern rap on the knuckles by the judge for sending cease and desist letters and bringing this case to court when they'd already proven in court that King Kong was in the public domain.
Ooh, boy, it's hard to be woke. It's hard to be woke.
Yeah, you knew what you were doing, Universal, you knobs, allegedly.
You should have tried harder.
More significantly than that, despite a failed appeal, Universal was ordered to pay $1.8 million to Nintendo following the Japanese company's counterclaim that they had lost out on licensing deals because of Universal's aggressive threats. The details of this counterclaim had included lost revenues, legal fees, photocopying expenses, and costs incurred creating graphs and charts. It's very specific. Not sure where Nintendo were getting their photocopying done, but it sounds like they were getting a bad deal. It does. I mean, but also, f*** them. If someone sued me and I won and it was blatantly they were in the wrong, I'll be like, I'm getting every penny back. Every penny. So watch it. So this all seemed to answer the often debated question on who would win in a fight between Donkey Kong and King Kong. Donkey Kong. King Kong might make the most noise, but Donkey Kong has the winning knockout punch, hands down. In one final plot twist, Tiger Electronics lived to regret signing that deal with Universal to produce an exclusive King Kong handheld game. Nintendo successfully sued Tiger Electronics for $58 million. Because they own it plagiarizes Donkey Kong. The reason the handheld game was deemed to be a complete rip-off of Donkey Kong. And we have come full circle. That is such a beautiful ending, but it's not the ending of this video. Because this is Business Plays. We got like tons more. We're barely a third of the way through. Queen and David... Is it David Bowie? David Bowie? I don't give a f***. Queen and David Bowie versus Vanilla Ice. During the autumn... Oh, it's like Queen the band, not the Queen. During the autumn of 1991, music history was made when a hip-hop single topped the Billboard charts for the very first time. Perhaps quite tragically though, the single in question was Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. Yes, unfortunately. That is quite a terrible song. A white rapper in predominantly black musical subculture, Vanilla Ice, real name Robert Van Winkle. I didn't even know Vanilla Ice was a white dude. Come out of touch. I guess that's why he's called Vanilla Ice, dude. Real name Robert Van Winkle. Dude. Times two. Actually managed to top the charts in countries around the world with Ice Ice Baby, even though the track had originally been buried as a B-side on an earlier flop single. During his 15 minutes of fame, Vanilla had talked up his rough experiences growing up on the street, and his record label had even completely fabricated some of the details in his autobiography to try and give the rising rap star a bit more street cred. In truth, Vanilla Ice spent most of his youth growing up in a relatively affluent Dallas suburb. Although, he's American. I know nothing about this guy. I was like, he was top in the UK, so I guess he's British. I feel like he's been in movies though. Vanilla Ice has been in movies, right? Just not movies I've seen. Although he did get embroiled in street scuffles now and then with his Dallas street gang and was once reportedly stabbed 5 times. In an affluent Dallas suburb? Dallas sounds rough. I've been to Dallas actually. All I remember is fucking hot. It wouldn't take too long for Vanilla Ice's fame to melt under the media spotlight, and he was quickly dismissed in most... Dallas was where Kennedy was killed, right? Because I've been there. I stayed in this sketchy hotel. It was really tall. It was like, I guess slightly south of Dallas, but you could walk to the center. And it was like half abandoned. Like half of the floors were just unoccupied. And it looked like it was once a big hotel. And we just went in. I think we booked online or whatever. And it was super cheap, so I was like, perfect. And then arrived and it was like, it's basically derelict. And they just had a few rooms running. And my room was really dirty and unpleasant. And I was like, this is horrible. And I left the next day and stayed at a better hotel. It was actually quite deceiving and annoying. I can still remember the pubs going quiet with thoughtful approval when the opening bass line came pumping out of the tinny speakers, only for the atmosphere to transform into a communal crushing disappointment when everyone realized it was that new rap song and not Under Pressure at all. Oh, ba 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 ba, ice ice baby, ba 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 ba, eh. Timmy. Ba 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 ba. Timmy. Ba 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 ba.
Ice, ice, baby.
In fact, Freddie Mercury had a very similar experience when he was enjoying his breakfast one morning and Ice Ice Baby came on the radio for the first time. He originally assumed he was listening to his own collaboration, but he had to put his spoon down in frozen bemusement when the vocals of Vanilla Ice kicked in. Even so, neither Queen nor Bowie were bothered enough about it to take legal action. What's David Bowie got to do with this? Oh, it's by David Bowie. I didn't even know David Bowie was part of writing Under Pressure. There you go. No, I don't care. Even so, they weren't bothered enough to take legal action, with Mercury later commenting that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. That's very kind. Didn't the guy who wrote, what's that song? I'll be watching you. Was it The Police? I think it was The Police. Sting. And then the guy who, was it Puff Daddy? Who copied it copied it and said like, I'll be missing you or whatever. I can't sing, I know. And he didn't ask permission or anything. And then the courts ruled that all of the money from that I'll Be Missing You song had to go to Sting. And it's like a ton of money even to this day. And I'm like, yeah, good. But their representatives felt annoyed enough to threaten Vanilla with a copyright infringement lawsuit. Of course, these days, something is perfectly legitimate in musical culture, as long as you follow the legal protocol for reusing another artist's work. But in the case of Vanilla Ice, he initially seemed to hope that nobody would notice the lifted bass line, despite the fact that it was blindly obvious to anyone with a semi-functioning ear. Okay, I guess it's more similar than I remember in my mind, because Danny says it's super obvious, so I trust him. He even had the cheek to deny that it was the same bass line because it put in an extra note in the middle of the riff. During an unintentionally hilarious TV interview, Vanilla attempted to demonstrate the difference in the two bass lines by delivering a vocal interpretation of each one, seemingly oblivious to the fact that they both sounded exactly the same and he was making himself look like a proper bellend. Oh, don't do that! Although maybe he's just a musical genius and only he can hear it. Doesn't matter, I guess it matters what the judge thinks. He later claims that he was just trying to be funny, but not that many people bought it. The case never actually made it to court, although it's only recently been revealed exactly how the matter was privately settled. Queen and Bowie were both given songwriting credits on Ice Ice Baby, which was probably quite a generous turn of events for, say, Bowie, because the offending bass line was created entirely by Queen bassist John Deacon. What the f***? It was generally believed for years that Vanilla Ice had sorted out some kind of royalty deal with Queen and Bowie, but that wasn't quite true. Vanilla Ice recently revealed that he felt it would be easier and cheaper to just buy the publishing rights for Under Pressure instead. Although the rights are said to have cost him $4 million, the faded rap star now claims that it's been a great long-term investment. Cool. Yeah, I mean, if you buying Under Pressure for $4 million, that's crazy. Like, you could be like, you can own Under Pressure, the song written by Queen, one of their most famous songs, for $4 million. That's wild. If I was mad rich, I'd just be like, yeah, I'll buy that, why not? Like, it's an investment, and also you own Under Pressure. Like, I'd be using it in my videos all the time. People be like, oh, you're gonna get claims. Bitch, no, I'm not. It's my song. It's mine. Dracula versus Nosferatu. I got in trouble. Not in trouble, but like in an early Business Blaze video. In trouble implies that I care. In an early Business Blaze video, because I was like, what the f*** is Nosferatu? And people are like, you know what Nosferatu is? God, you're so dumb. And I still don't, and I still don't care. As any true cinema connoisseur knows, the 1922 silent German film Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, is an early masterpiece of the silver screen. Well, I say that, The last few times I tried to watch it, I ended up falling asleep before I got to the end. I think it needed a few more car chases. More commonly known simply as Nosferatu, the film charts the story of a young clerk who travels to Transylvania to do business with a wealthy count who lives in a spooky castle and turns out to be a vampire. This does sound very familiar to the story that I know better, Dracula, although of course I've never seen that either. Later on, the vampire stows away inside a coffin on board a ship heading towards the clerk's hometown, and upon arrival, he devotes time to terrorizing the clerk's wife. If all of that sounds familiar, that's of course because I just described the basic plot for Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. In fact, Nosferatu is probably the more authentic to the original book than some of the later official Dracula movie adaptations. Surely this was this was ages ago, the book was ages ago, so I mean, like, the reason Sherlock Holmes, you see all those weird Sherlock Holmes TV shows and movies nowadays, is because a lot of it just fell out of copyright, so anyone could do anything with it. The German film producer Albin Grau had originally conceived the idea of shooting a silent movie version of Dracula in 1916, and the copyright to the late Bram Stoker's book was already in the public domain in the US by this point. Sure, okay. But this wasn't the case in Albin's home country, where the film would be produced. In fact, the copyright, which was still owned by Bram Stoker's widow Florence, wasn't due to lapse in Germany until 1962. Now that is interesting, because different countries can have different copyright laws. Like, it can be copyright free in the US in the public domain, but then Germany might be like, I guess some countries just copyright never expires. Maybe, I don't know. Just do it in the US then, though, right? I don't know how it works, I'm not a lawyer. Albin didn't fancy the thought of hanging around for another 46 years to make his movie. It's not entirely clear if he approached Florence Stoker to obtain the rights and was turned down, or more likely he just decided to go ahead and shoot the film anyway, with a few notable tweaks from the book. When the cameras finally started rolling in 1921, the vampiric title character had been given the new name of Nosferatu, and appeared, it's a weird name, isn't it? And appeared on screen to be more of a goofy ghoul than the traditional suave and charming Dracula. The names of all the other characters and a few of the locations were changed, but there was still no denying that the plot was pretty much identical. I didn't know about the terrorizing the clerk thing, or that he sneaked on board this ship back to wherever the clerk. I don't know what's going on. But I've never seen it. I didn't even know the plot of Dracula. Like Frankenstein, I feel like Dr. Frankenstein creates a monster from the bodies of dead people, and it comes alive and tries to kill him. I've never seen it, but I feel like I know that story. I didn't know the story of Dracula. The film was warmly received by critics when it premiered at the Marble Hall of the Berlin Zoological Garden. Weird place to have a movie premiere. With one journalist famously observing that the horror movie felt like a chilly draft from Doomsday. But it never really made much money, and Albin's production company would shortly file for bankruptcy after making just one film. The strange thing about the Nosferatu legal saga is that Albin may well have gotten away with blatantly ripping off Dracula if it were not for a single line on the promotional poster, which read, "Freely adapted from Bram Stoker's Dracula." Uh-oh. Don't do that. Although I feel like in that case you'd be like, yeah, I'm giving credit because it is an adaptation. This feels honest. And then you'd be like, that's going to come back to bite you. Should have talked to a lawyer. A copy of this poster was anonymously posted to Florence Stoker in London. And despite the fact that she never actually saw Nosferatu in her life, Florence sued Albin's company for producing what she felt to be a pirated version of her late husband's classic and sprawling mess of a novel. Oh, I didn't realize it was bad. Or like a sprawling mess. To be fair, allegedly. To be fair, Albin didn't really have a legal leg to stand on, and the courts didn't take long to rule that Nosferatu was guilty of copyright infringement. Yeah, this seems pretty cut and dry, doesn't it? But the problem was that the film company had already gone bankrupt, and there was no way Florence was ever going to get any financial compensation from Albin. Well then, that's fine. If he ripped you off, he didn't make any money, so you're not have made any money. Like, the whole point of suing someone is to bring you back to level. It's like, you've been injured, financially, in this case, by someone ripping it off and making a film of your husband's book. But the film didn't make any money. There's no money. So what are you suing for? Obviously, make sure they don't do it again. Set the right precedent so that people won't be ripping off your husband's book until it's out of copyright or getting permission from you. Great. But what do you expect? It doesn't matter. It's fine. So she gave up on that idea and went for the next best thing. She demanded every copy of Nosferatu be hunted down and destroyed. Fair enough. And her wish was granted in 1925 when a German court ruled that all copies of the film would be confiscated and burnt to a crisp. Is that what they specifically said? That seems really specific. The story could have ended there, with the permanent wiping of Nosferatu from history, were it not for the fact that a single copy somehow survived and made its way to the US, where it was free from the copyright laws of Germany. The film was hailed as a forgotten masterpiece by US cinema audiences, and by the 1960s, after the copyright of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel had finally lapsed worldwide, Nosferatu had become universally recognized as all-time classic horror, 40 years after it originally flopped in Germany. It's interesting to note that some elements that were now traditionally associated with Dracula actually came from Nosferatu rather than the original book. Oh, again, I love it when things come like this nice circle. I like that. For example, sunlight was relatively harmless to vampires in Bram Stoker's novel, but was shown to have lethal effects in Nosferatu, an idea which was embraced in dozens of later official Dracula movies. Yeah, I mean, well, can they be official? It's in public domain, so nothing is really official. Ultimately, it's quite fitting that the story of the copyright dispute over the Nosferatu film followed so closely in the footsteps of the Dracula narrative. Oh yeah. Okay, the film was believed to be totally destroyed once for all, but then came back from the dead and continues to hypnotize fresh blood almost a century later. There you go. Hypnotize fresh blood, is that how it hypnotize? Alright, whatever. Mike Tyson's tattoo artist versus Warner Brothers. Finally, here's a quick inky illustration on how a piece of work can be copyrighted regardless of whether it appears in print, on screen, on canvas, or simply tattooed on someone's face. The American comedy film The Hangover from 2009 had proven to be a massive success for Warner Brothers, and had been notable for featuring former professional boxer and convicted rapist Mike Tyson playing an exaggerated version of himself. Yeah. Tyson also popped up in a much smaller role in 2011's sequel, The Hangover Part 2 in 2011, although his shadow, if not his face, loomed large over the movie, even after the camera stopped rolling. During an early sequence, one of the leading characters, Stu, played by Ed Helms, wakes up in a filthy hotel room in Bangkok to find that he's got a new tattoo on his face, which he can't remember having done. And the distinctive tribal tattoo art should have looked very familiar to the audience, as it was identical to the one that part-time actor and convicted rapist Mike Tyson had worn on his face since 2003. We're bringing up the Mike Tyson. I didn't even know Mike Tyson was a rapist. He's convicted, so it's not allegedly. Wow, that's terrible. Although the similarity was never directly referenced in the film, this is obviously meant to be a little comedic nod to the guest star of the movie. However, Missouri tattoo artist who originally designed the tattoo for Mike Tyson didn't see the funny side. Wait, hang on. If I'm paying a tattoo artist to tattoo my body, they own the copyright on that? That doesn't feel right. Like, I feel like I paid you to design this thing for me, which you put on my body. That is now my copyright. I have purchased it from you. I'll be a little bit concerned, because if it wasn't, because the tattoo artist could go back and be like, you know that tattoo you've got? That's my copyright, and I'm terminating my license of it to you. So you have to have that tattoo laser removed, or keep paying me a license to use it. That can't be right, surely. Surely this guy's got to lose. With Tyson's approval, oh no. Tyson granted approval. Victor Whitmill had registered the copyright for the tattoo design after slapping it on Tyson's face, and now believed that the appearance of the same tattoo in The Hangover Part 2 constituted an authorized exploitation of his work and reckless copyright infringement. Okay, yeah, so he registered the copyright with Tyson's permission, so this complicates things a little bit, rather than just regular person on the street who just had a tattoo done. That would be onerous. At this point, the film had yet to be released, and Whitmill's original request to the US District Courts was that in the absence of any financial compensation, the tattoo should be removed from the movie and all associated marketing, which would effectively have halted the release of the sequel altogether. Yeah, that's going to be complicated. It's worth pointing out that the philanthropist and convicted rapist Mike Tyson took no part in these legal proceedings, and probably felt a bit awkward about the whole thing. In their defense, Warner Brothers argued that any delay in the film's release would result in a huge financial loss, around $50 million, from the money that had already been pumped into the marketing of the film. They also argued that there was no legal precedent for the case, and the use of permanent tattoo on a human being's face could not be controlled by copyright law. The judge rejected Whitman's request for a preliminary injunction, and The Hangover Part 2 was allowed to hit the cinema screens on time as the legal case rumbled on. I really hope they lose. This doesn't feel right. Warner Brothers was becoming increasingly agitated about the whole affair and claimed that they would digitally alter the tattoo design on the home video release of the film if the matter wasn't resolved sharpish. And it would have been interesting to see how things might have panned out if the legal case had run its course. Whitman may have held the copyright on what he viewed himself as one of the most distinctive tattoos in the nation. Alright dude, chill out. It's a tribal tattoo. Well done. No one's ever done that before. Never seen it before. But would he have been able to prove in court that the use of the tattoo in the film had resulted in a negative impact on the market for his work, or that Warner Brothers would have raked in unfair profits from the use of the design? Yeah, this is the whole point. As I brought up earlier, the point of suing is to bring you back to zero. This guy lost no money. In fact, he's probably gained money from the whole thing, because people are like, oh, I saw that tattoo on Stu's face, and just seeing it on Mike Tyson's face as a rapist didn't make me want it. But when I saw it on Stu, I think he's a dentist, on his face, I was like, that's for me. That's for me. Victor, I want it. We'll never know, as Warner Brothers eventually reached an amicable private settlement with Whitmill, and the two stayed on the home video release of the movie. The settlement figure was never disclosed, but bearing in mind that The Hangover 2 went on to rake in just under $600 million in profit, I imagine that Whitman received a fairly big pot of dough. But unlike the hero of the Donkey Kong arcade machine, we'll never know exactly how high he managed to get. Wow, this was a long video. That Donkey Kong thing was at the beginning of this one. Okay, this has been Business Blaze. Thank you for watching. You can purchase some merch. There's this t-shirt, there's a whole bunch else. Smash the dislike button t-shirt as well. All that great stuff at purchasethemerch.co. Find that below, a link to that below, and thank you for watching. Fascinating.